So we've looked at explore, we've looked at experience, and for lots of young people, employment is the end goal. Not for all, but the closer we can get young people to employment, the better. Employment is, and for those members in the room that have completed the benchmark, I am sorry, it is the largest part of the benchmark report. It is enormous because it has to be. Employment covers everything from how you engage, attract, recruit, and then retain young people. And all of those parts of the puzzle are really important. It is where we bring together the explore activities that might have taken place and the experience activities too. So it's massively important that we get it right. And it's often only at this point that employers start to measure, because they can see that those numbers are really clear. How many people are applying? Who are they? Are we measuring ethnicity, diversity as part of this too? For a lot of employers, the employment part of this is only then where they realise actually something's going wrong in explore and we weren't quite ready for it, because it's where all the numbers are, right? It's where our heads on seats are, where our bums on seats are within our organisations. Employment is such an important aspect. It doesn't sit, though, on its own. When I think about the opportunities to explore work, I think about my own. I never had any opportunities to explore work when I was little. I grew up in a free school meal home. We lived in council housing, and in fact, 80% of my family still do. And the roles and occupations that the family have are all within construction and building. So my dad for many years worked for Bellway Homes, and then he was self-employed. So my experience of work was sitting in my dad's van, normally eating a donut or something like that. And my mum had 6 children. She still does. We're all still here. But I grew up as one of 6. Really busy household. And the council housing problem is still as big as it was then. So there were 6 of us in a 3-bedroom home. And for many years, I was the only daughter. So I got my own room. And then my 2 little sisters come along and ruined my life, I think. But that is to say, within our house, and within my lifetime in exploring it, we have had different instances happen to us too. So unemployment, having to move house, homelessness, experience of the criminal justice system. And within that school and education environment, nobody ever really picked up perhaps what I was missing. It come to that conversation about work experience. And because I was one of 6 children, it was decided that I would work in a primary school, because for sure I was doing some of those roles and responsibilities at home. No one asked what my skills was. It was actually, Lawrence, you can go and work in a primary school. And kids were the last thing on my mind. I grew up as one of 6. I'm the 4th in line, but I'm the eldest girl. So I did everything for all of those people. I didn't want to deal with any more of them. But I did. I went along to the work experience and I learned some things. I learned that teachers and primary school teachers are amazing people, but that wasn't for me. That wasn't what I was going to do. But I had no other experiences or ways to access work. I, through luck better than judgment, ended up at university because all my friends were going. And in fact, I went to a university that I could still get home from within 45 minutes, but I lived out because student debt wasn't real for me then too. So I moved out and I went and I did it. And I chose the university because it had an industrial placement year. So a 4-year sandwich course. The 3rd year was within industry. And I thought, oh, great, they'll have loads of employers that will just want to hire us. We're at university. Hey, we're going to be what every employer wants to choose. And the university had 4 employers that they were connected with. Colgate, because it was nearby, Disney, Lloyds Banking Group, and Enterprise Rent-A-Car. So you were allowed to go and find your own, and lots of those young people who had experiences of work, or a parent with I'm going to say good job, my dad's job wasn't not good, but a different job, were able to go out and found their own. And I managed to wangle myself an interview at Disney. And I was like, this is it. I am going to go and work at Disney, and that is going to change my whole life. I can see Sharon laughing at me already. So the role at Disney was in head office. It was a HR role because that's what the opportunities were available. And for my whole life, no one had ever asked any questions about the skills. I'd managed to find myself at university. When we were looking at courses, the person who you talked to about courses thought, actually, I could be a social worker because, again, I'd cared for people all my life. But I decided I was going to do business management instead. But other than that, no one had ever asked me what I was good at. So I sat in front of one of the hiring managers at Disney, and I can't believe I'm going to say this on stage, but I sat in front of the hiring manager of Disney and probably gave one of the worst interviews anyone's ever given, ever, because I didn't know anything. So the hiring manager at Disney asked me, what would your team members say about you? And I actually said to him, you'll have to ask them. Because I didn't know any better. Nobody had ever said to me, hey, there are better answers to that question. It's why I love what Serena's doing and thinking about how generative AI can ask questions for young people and feedback. Because actually, if I'd have put that into a generative tool, it would have laughed at me like you had, and then I'd have known not to say it out loud. So lo and behold, I didn't get a job at Disney, but what that opportunity did give me was the chance to have the conversations with the other people who were on my course, who had perhaps not more work experience opportunities than me, but better conversations about work than I had ever had within their families and within those moments. So I went to my best friend, who still is, and said, what did you say? He did get a job at Disney. It's not all it's cracked up to be. And he got the job at Disney. And actually, I was like, oh, but I'm more confident than you. And he was quite shy. I was like, oh, but I'm more confident than you. He was like, I just had good answers. You know, right, that you just have to say this. And I was like, oh, no, I didn't. And I didn't know because no one had ever put it together for me because the explore and the experience part was missing. But also that hiring manager at Disney, I knew from the second I answered that first question that I wasn't going to get that job. And he had no tools or no ability to engage or attract me back into that place. And actually, it is a good place to work, Disney. I feel like I should come with caveats and lawsuits galore, I don't know. But as part of that, it taught me a really valuable lesson, but it also taught me the employer that I want to be and how I want to face young people in a room too. I want for us to be able to talk today about sharing interview answers, making it a fair and good place for young people to access work. As employers, we face some big opportunities, and I don't want to talk about everything being a challenge, but we face opportunities, and we are facing a moment where we have the opportunity to provide loads and loads of different types of work. We will be exploring T-levels, apprenticeships, there'll be a skills and growth levy soon. We are talking about the Get Britain Working paper. We will raise national insurance. We will raise the minimum wage. And for a lot of young people, they're really worried about being worth £24,000 as an example. The day after the budget, I went to get my coffee from the little hut outside the train station, and they were having a conversation, this bunch of kind of 20 to 25-year-olds, as to who was probably going to lose their job because now it was too expensive to hire them. And so actually, as we think about work and the good work we can do, we're going to cover a lot today, and we're going to talk about all aspects of it because this is the biggest bit and the biggest part of it. But I am going to start with the stand-up, sit-down game. She says start 11 minutes in, but you'll forgive me because I tell a good story, so it's okay. As part of this, we are going to stand up and sit down. For those who didn't clock in the last session, LJ has the answers, so if she does something, that's it. So I'm going to ask her to remain seated because Ola was already hoping that was going to be your thing too. We don't like cheaters. Over here. So, in our 2024 Youth Voice Census, 70% of young people rated their employer as youth-friendly. If you believe that statement is true, please stand up. If you think it is false, please sit down. We good? We happy? It's true. Look how you win when I'm on stage. Oh, I love that for you. A third of young people struggle with their well-being at work. If you believe that is true, please stand up. If you think it's false, please sit down. It really paid off. It is true. You are correct. good. I wish I could throw chocolates at you. I didn't bring anything. I've only got a Haven pen, but that feels dangerous, so I won't. 1 in 5 young people have considered leaving their job in the last 12 months. If you think that is true, please stand up. If you think that is false, please stay seated. So 1 in 5 young people have considered leaving their job in the last 12 months. Kira, we're looking at you. Is this you? No. No. Fab. I'm just looking for our staff. No, they're all right. They're right. Okay. It's false. And sadly, it's because it's 3 in 5 young people have considered leaving their job in the last 12 months. I'm having so much fun, but I do know Hayley's got to come up. So we've got 2 more quick questions. In our benchmark this year, we found that 74% of employment roles are designed to ensure that they are inclusive of all young people, including those with special educational needs or disabilities. So if you think that is true, that employers who completed our benchmark this year, 74% of them are designing roles with young people in mind. Please stand up. If you think it's false, please stay seated. What do we do? Are you two just going together? Hold hands and stand up. I love it. It's true. That's amazing. For those that stayed seated, did you think it was higher or lower? Lower. Yeah, Sharon thought it was higher. Sharon is disappointed in you. Is what I know. In our benchmark, we found that 50% of employers have a youth staff network. True or false? It did not pay off this time. It is false, unfortunately. So on that bombshell, I am going to hand over to Hayley from Green Core, who's going to talk through the amazing work that they do. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm delighted to have been asked by Youth Employment UK to come along and tell you all about our early careers journey at Green Core. So I'm the Early Careers and Skills Manager, and for those that might not have heard of Green Core before, we're a leading manufacturer of convenience foods supplying a wide range of chilled, frozen and ambient foods to the major supermarkets and other retailers in the UK. And that's just a sample of some of the products that we do. We normally get looks of who? Or, oh, were you in energy? So it's important to tell you what we do. And part of being Green Core is the Green Core way. It's a massive part of what we do, and you'll see from our image there that people at the core is at the heart. We ultimately believe that we differentiate ourselves through our people, and therefore we strive to create a culture where our people can be themselves at work and fulfil their potential, which is why early careers programmes are so important to us and what we do. So I wanted to share a little bit of what our portfolio of early careers looks like. So all of them are structured development programmes. We want to create opportunities for people to start their careers with us, particularly young people, and we want that to create a pipeline of talent that can help us drive our future success. Each of our programmes is designed around a real business need or a challenge, and it helps us to prepare for future skills gaps by growing our own talent. It's also a really important part of our inclusion and diversity strategy because we know that our early careers programmes bring in some of the gaps that we face in our organisation, particularly those young people. So as I say, they're structured development programmes. They're designed to support colleagues who join us at the start of their career journey. And for the business, it's a huge benefit that we can attract, grow and develop talent for the future. So there's 5 pathways at the moment, which is a mix of apprenticeships, graduates and placement programmes. And these are all based across our operations, technical, engineering, finance and commercial functions. So we're really proud to have a STEM offer within that. And when we build these programmes, which we started doing back in 2017, 2018, we always start at the end. So what's really important is understanding what's our need, why do we need these programmes, or what's the business challenge, and how can early careers programmes support us with that. We also want to identify what's good going to look like. There's really no point in delivering some of these programmes if we're not going to set ourselves up for success and those people that join the programmes. When we identify the solutions that are available to us to meet our needs, we want to make sure that we've got the right learning in place that will enable us to build and grow the knowledge and skills that we need in the future and pipeline for the future roles. And part of that is about monitoring and reviewing each programme. And doing this regularly, it's critical because we're always open to feedback, and we know that what worked for us in 2018 probably won't work the same way now. So we adapt and amend things as we go along and regularly review against what our business needs are now, because our strategy evolves as an organisation and the needs of those people on programme and the leaders in the business. And so across all of our programmes, it's really important that we have an element of consistency. It helps our business to understand what to expect from somebody who's on an early careers programme, and also for the colleagues that are on programme, they know what to expect as well. So there are a number of elements that we make sure that we include, making sure that candidates have a positive experience with us throughout the induction and onboarding process. So from attraction activity, so I know it was mentioned earlier today around having young people attending careers events, going into schools. We ask all of our apprentices and graduates to go back to their own school and talk about their experience and what it's really like in the working world. Through to joining us. So Early Careers Week is a really big event in our annual calendar where we bring all of our new starts together and encourage some of our existing colleagues on programme to come and join and talk about how they found their first couple of years in the business. Oops, sorry. Ensuring we've also got a structured development plan or programme of learning in each programme. So whether this is an apprenticeship standard or a functional plan of activity that's led by our functional leads, they're really important parts to make sure that we cover all of the elements of training or learning that's needed to be successful, not only in that role, but also in the business, and really understand the culture of Greencore. We make sure that all colleagues get exposure to learning activities that will set them up for the future and help them to understand how they can then take that through once they come off programme. And this again is something that was mentioned earlier today. So managers and mentors are so important to our programmes, and they get just as much support as the colleagues on programme, and I'd possibly argue at times they get a lot more, because we also know that they're our pipeline leaders of these programmes. So by truly understanding the colleagues, we know that the following years they're going to be engaged and excited to lead the next group that come into us, and we want them to be passionate about that as well. We also give colleagues on programme exposure to a variety of roles or experiences. Again, it was said earlier that you don't know what you don't know what you don't like, and you don't know what you do like. So this really helps us to kind of form into, when they roll off programme, into their substantive role, understanding what is going to be really great for them in the future and where they see that going. A lot of the advice that they get given at school might be quite narrow and down one path, and it's only once you're in an organisation you truly understand the breadth of different types of opportunities there are. So all of our programmes will either have a rotation that's built in as part of the programme, or they'll be encouraged to job shadow or network with others in the organisation. At Greencore, we've got such varied sites with different products produced, and so there's different experiences to be found. So we do encourage our engineering colleagues, for example, if one works at a site making sandwiches, we'd love them to go and visit a site making ready meals to understand the difference. And then at the end of the programme, we want our alumni to be really ready to take ownership for their own development and keep growing. We don't want them to kind of wait for us to tell them what to do to learn. So as they go through their programme and prepare to roll off, we'll introduce them to some structured learning, but we'll also signpost them to opportunities that will help them to take that ownership. And we hope by the end of the scheme that they're really passionate about developing and growing, not only for themselves, but the next generation that will follow in their footsteps. And it's not all plain sailing. We've had so many learnings along the way, and some we've really have found out the hard way, and I'm sure that will never stop. But some of the key things that we found. So we've got some really passionate and ambitious colleagues on our programmes, and they're very keen to be the next CEO. But sometimes we have to manage their expectations and encourage them to trust us whilst they're on programme. And I'm sure they'll get there in the end. It just might not be within the next 12 months. Equally, we've got some managers that expect the final product as soon as the colleagues join us, and helping them to navigate the system and understand the process and trust us can be a bit challenging at times, but ultimately what they'll see is the reward at the end once these colleagues become our alumni. As an employer, it's really important that we care for our colleagues, especially with these types of programmes. Many colleagues we find are inexperienced, so having a robust safeguarding approach is really important to us. And that's in addition to all of the safeguarding that we'll have in place from a health and safety or a people policy perspective. We face many challenging conversations around a variety of topics, and so we do have to offer lots of pastoral support, but it's also important to us that we manage it in the right way. Another part is having our ambassadors. So we operate what we call Green Core ambassadors. That's predominantly focused on our colleagues on programme, but it spans much wider than that. So having our ambassadors who are on programme are really great because they're always so keen to talk about the experience they've had and tell people how they can get involved and do something similar. But equally, having those outside of the business, we've got colleagues at sites who are really engaged with looking out for young people. We have sites who go out to scout groups to sponsor their food badges, looking at really innovative ways of how they can encourage people into the food industry. But equally, we talk to our exec regularly. They're really keen to know what's going on with our early careers programme because they know it's such a great investment for the business and for the future of the organisation. We celebrate many milestones and achievements as we can, even if it's just a small email to say well done, a thank you to somebody helping out with the programmes, recognising completion of a qualification or an apprenticeship, or nominating colleagues for awards. We know that it truly helps colleagues on programme know that we care about their success, and after all, we've all got the same goal, and that's for them to be successful in the future. And then finally, having a broad group of connections in other businesses and networks is important to us. So kind of groups such as Youth Employment UK or the National Skills Academy really help us to kind of just check in best practice or speak to other employees about the challenges that they may be facing. And finally, how do we know it's working? We try our best to know our programmes inside out as much as possible. There's been a few mentions of data early today, and knowing that data and understanding our people is really beneficial. So for apprenticeships, for us, we use a tool that monitors all programmes. We can see all of our learners and all of our providers in one place so that we can keep close to what's going on, and it helps us to quickly activate support when we need to. We also look at all of our early careers performance against the targets and KPIs of the wider organisation as well. It helps us to see how we're doing. So whether that's our regular check-ins that go across the business, we like to say, or, you know, our early careers colleagues on a par with the rest of the organisation. Most of the time they are better. But that just helps us to prove that return on investment and understand our customers who are out in the business. And as you can see from some of the stats on the slide, I think it's gone a bit awry, but we know that our early careers colleagues remain loyal. They intend to build meaningful careers with us. They're a really engaged colleague community, and they're most likely to recommend us as a place to work. And so for the future, there's lots of things for us to look at. We're continually reviewing our programmes to make sure the ones that we've got in place are right, or we might need to introduce some new ones. Probably the biggest thing for us, and I'll need to talk to Haven about this, is looking at work experience and how we accelerate what we've already got in place and make that kind of better for the future. But yeah, we're quite proud of the work that we do, but we do know there's plenty more to go after.
Thanks so much, Hayley. Come take a seat. Come back, and we will open shortly for questions too. So get thinking of some really good ones. This is your last chance to ask questions today. So take it and use it, please. And Hayley, just one thank you for not sharing all the pictures of when we came to site and dressed in all of the protective gear. I think I was sort of hoping you might put LJ's picture up with her in a hairnet, but you didn't, and that was, I think, good for us. Thank you. And so, Ola, please tell us a little bit more about the role that BITC plays in this. What did the BITC do to support employers, and what are the biggest challenges and opportunities we're seeing at the moment?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Lauren. And can I just, first of all, start off by saying a massive thank you to the Youth Employment UK team for today. This is such a topical issue for us to be discussing. And just a massive thank you for all the work you do on such an important and key issue. For those who might not be familiar with business in the community, we are a membership organisation, a business membership organisation. I think the name probably gives it away. And we were set up by His Majesty the King over 40 years ago. And our mission is to create a fairer and a greener society driven by businesses, because we believe in the power of businesses to tackle some of these key issues that we have. And to your question, I think for me, the biggest challenge for businesses is amongst all the plethora of things they have to navigate over the past couple of years, how do we ensure that youth employment remains, and in some cases becomes a boardroom discussion? I think that will be the main challenge for chief executives and boards across the country. And I think one of the things that we do is to convene business leaders. We also challenge business leaders, but more importantly, what we want to collaborate with business leaders. And one of the things I'm really excited about is our partnership with the Youth Futures Foundation around how do we actually better support businesses to understand the barriers that young people face when they're trying to come into work, and also amplifying that best practice. We know, employers like Greencore are being responsible businesses, and how do we share that best practice to encourage other businesses to do that. So I think that's for me that's exciting, and we've already talked about sort of the landscape and the rise in numbers of young people who are not in education, not in employment, and not in training. But I think the positive, and I knew that answer, Lauren, to 70%. I think that's probably the only answer. No one was
suggesting that you were looking at my notes in the green room. No one was suggesting that for a second.
And I think for me, it's refreshing to hear that 70% of young people, when they actually get into work, feel that their employers are youth-friendly. But there's a lot of work to get young people into work. And that might also not be the case for young people who might be marginalised through race or through being care experienced or having an experience of the criminal justice system. So actually, from an inclusion perspective, how do we continue to show that best practice to chief execs across the country?
Thank you. And it's where, as we were setting out to do the benchmark, we commissioned the Institute of Employment Studies to do some research into if it was worth it. Did we need another benchmark? Do we need frameworks? What's the value? How do they work? And it turns out they are needed, and particularly one that has a holistic view for youth unemployment. They could find no evidence that one existed, but actually, particularly within the UK, but actually where you are measuring work for employers, it does start to create change and support. But actually one of the biggest things for employers is about kind of the toolkits, the information, how you put that practice into place. And I know that BITC have got a number of toolkits. We worked on one together too, but your new work with the Futures Foundation sounds interesting. But what are the other kind of toolkits and information that members that might not already be here in the room today can utilise?
Yes, and I think those toolkits and those reports are important to continue to showcase that evidence to businesses. And last year, one of the things that we looked at was job design, and I think it was one of your questions. And I think when I talk to young people, I think the three things they say about job design is, does my employer pay me in relation to how much contribution I make to the workplace? And that pay is important. Does my workplace offer that flexibility for me to do everything else that life might throw at me? And also, actually, does my employer prioritise my learning, my development, and my progression? I think actually from a young person's perspective, that flexibility and the progression piece came out strongly. And the moral imperative is important, but also for chief execs, that sort of economic case is critical for them to be able to influence their boards as well. And one of the things that we found through our partnership with the McKinsey Health Institute was if employers prioritise these three things, there's actually an economic value of between 5,000 to 15,000 to materialise from each employee, and I think that's important. If employers can prioritise these three things in terms of that job design perspective, there's a productivity benefit, there's a retention benefit, and more importantly, there's a health and wellbeing benefit as well. So that report's available, but I think, as you've quite rightly said, there's a lot of organisations who have the evidence, the case studies to prove what works in this space, and we just need to continue doing that.
Yeah, and work a little bit more collaboratively together, which is why it's so great to have so many of the organisations in the landscape here today. So we can do that. We can connect and collaborate. And I think as employers in the room, I can imagine it gets frustrating sometimes when there's another badge, there's another thing. But what we're talking about here is the connectivity of all it. Something like the Youth Employment Benchmark can allow you to put into practice the strategy that sits behind it, to give you the tools to explore where you might start, which of the other badges and pieces of information you might need. And you're right. We hear every year from young people in the Youth Voice Census. It is. They want to be paid fairly for the work that they do. They want to be trained and developed, and they want to feel like they are welcome there. And you have to show young people they are welcome there. They won't just know. Unfortunately, today's society, they won't just know that. And life teaches them very fast that they can't just turn up and be welcome somewhere, sadly. Kira, I know you have had a really interesting journey into work too. Kira is our youth ambassador and the chair of our youth ambassador board too, but will speak today about her apprenticeship experience as well. Do you want to share a little bit about your journey, Kira, and what really works in your apprenticeship for you?
Okay, so my journey into work. So I went to college, did my A-levels, all humanities-based, and I took a year out because I decided I didn't want to go to uni. I thought I was going to do history and politics and thought, well, what would I do afterwards? And academia and teaching didn't really appeal to me. So I thought, right, let's take a year out. And my parents were all for it. I still had my part-time job. That was fine. And then as the year went on, I thought, yeah, uni I don't think really is for me. And then I completely changed course and decided to look at engineering. And I thought, how do English, politics and history all match up with engineering? Apparently, well, when I was doing my research, it really did, especially the English part. So I was doing my research, I was going on, is it the top 100 apprenticeships? So, Rate My Apprenticeship, that's it. So I went on that website and I found Youth Employment UK as well, just before I took my gap year as well. So all of the support from these guys have been really helping. And so I was doing my research, I applied to, must have been about 8 or 9, didn't really get through, got no feedback as to why, which was quite disheartening. But my parents were behind me saying, keep going, so I did. And then as of this year, I've been finished my apprenticeship a year, and I'm now a technical author, so I write engineering documents. And doing that whole thing, so I started September 2020, so doing the whole application process during COVID was not fun, I have to say. Like the first week of lockdown was when I did my online interview, which was meant to be in person. Didn't really have much experience with Skype, and then it didn't help that my interviewers were 15 minutes late to my interview, so I was sat there sweating and panicking, and it wasn't fun. So going through COVID, it was quite a stressful time. It was things that no one had ever experienced really before. So college wasn't fun. We started about 6 months late, and just the whole thing, I think kind of we're still getting through it now, really. As for things that worked and didn't work, again, I have to be a bit fair to my employer because COVID did throw quite a few things into the mix there. But I think one thing I did notice, and upon reflection, I think the types of people that need to be in apprenticeships, people who like working with young people, is what I found. Because there are a few people where they were great at teaching and great in training, but you need to be passionate about young people to actually work with them. And not see it as a chore, because you can really feed off that. So I think sometimes picking who's in those instructor roles as well, and mentoring was definitely a big one.
Wow, I think we're all seeing other employees, aren't we? In the as Kira speaks, and we hear every year in the Youth Voice census, always young people in work are always the happiest, but young people in work who are in apprenticeships tend to be the happiest of all of the cohorts throughout. So those in education and those out as well. And actually, as we completed the Youth Voice census this year, we did some special additional regional reports for the West Midlands and Greater Manchester as well. And in the West Midlands, you're 3 times more likely to be happy in your job if you've got a job in the West Midlands. So for anyone that does live here, you are lucky to live here. Might not feel like it in other ways, transport, etc. But actually, in the West Midlands, you are 3 times as happy if you are in work. That might be a really depressing fact when you realise how sad the rest of us are, but I don't know. What makes apprenticeships work, what we hear from young people, is having the space to learn and train at the same time, having support. Kira, was there kind of mentors in and around you? How was the support as you were learning and working in your apprenticeship?
I think it really improved after I finished college because, college just wasn't great. And then I found people to really help mentor me and help me in places I didn't expect, people who weren't even official mentors. They didn't think they knew what they knew, and these were guys who were maybe 30, 40 years in the industry. And I got a lot of help from them. So I think finding people in unexpected places. But work also does have mentor programs in the different trades as well. So I actually have an official mentor now who's both personal and professional, and he's been brilliant. He's a facility engineer, so a bit different to my role, but it's something I think I'll explore now because of him. So I think there's been in places that I haven't really expected, and people who really should be in those roles that actually aren't, but they don't have the confidence even though they've been in work their whole lives. So I think it's encouraging more people to get into it, and they never know, they'll surprise themselves, I think.
Amazing. We passed to Hayley for a second. Hayley, you talked about the kind of holistic package you pulled together for young people who start. Can you talk a little bit more about how your mentoring programme works? You heard a little bit about it earlier, but in terms of the package you get on one of those programmes, is it that everybody gets a mentor? Is there a learning, a training coach? What's the offer when a young person joins?
So for all of our programmes where possible, we aim to have a functional lead. So that is our subject matter expert within that business area that understands the role, understands the target end role for the programme as well. And so they will help them to understand what training and learning they might need locally, but also offer that support as a mentor. They'll also then get a dedicated mentor for them that will support them through the duration of the programme, hopefully. And their role is to give them advice, give them guidance, reflect on their own career journey. We typically go to people who are in or above the target end role that the early careers colleague is working towards. And we also then wrap around the additional support that they get from kind of us as the early careers team. So making sure that we give them regular updates on how they can take ownership for their own journey, or also putting some interventions in place for them to kind of help and build those behavioural skills and those things that are going to help them long term. And I often say, put it in their toolkit for the future.
Amazing, thank you. We are going to open up for questions in the room. The light is really bright in my eyes, so wave, jump, holler. Ellie, we have one just down here. And then, just while we move over to there too, I am at the end of this session going to ask you for the one thing that you would tell every employer in the room to do today. So I'm going to give you a little bit of time to think about that, and then we'll go for some questions. Hello.
Hi, yeah. I wanted to ask the panel about the application processes that you have in place. How do you make them more accessible? I ask this question because the young people we work with don't have access often to a laptop. And I don't know if anyone's ever tried it, but doing an apprenticeship application on your phone is not easy. And also the questions sometimes are quite laborious, and it's quite difficult for young people if they're really not used to it. I was actually at a roundtable discussion last week with a young person who was really well educated, really well motivated, and he'd said he had applied for over 300 apprenticeships and not got one opportunity. So for a young person like that has, all the kind of right skills to get into an apprenticeship based on, compared to young people that we work with, how do we make it more accessible for those people to be able to even get a foot in the door and apply?
Fantastic. Hayley?
Yeah, so I think for us, the first stage, it is an online application. And for me, I've got an 18-year-old son who's trying to find a job. Absolutely horrendous to apply for anything on a phone, the amount of questions, so I completely understand that. I think for us, that first stage, we do need some initial screening questions because we know that quite often there are people who are probably overqualified for an apprenticeship, for example. They're already skilled, there's nothing for them to learn. So we tend to keep those initial questions just to be the what do we absolutely need to know. Our second stage then would be a telephone conversation, and that's when we'd start to ask more. So what we're trying to gain from that is that they truly understand about our industry and the role. Before then, we'd progress them to an assessment centre, and that would be a combination of virtual and in person. So we try and make it as inclusive as possible. We use technology that is more accessible to all, but yeah, we give them varied opportunities to put their best version of themselves forward. But yeah, that initial stage is about what's the absolute minimum that we need to know to be able to look at them for the next stage.
Ola, is there anything in the toolkits that you've seen?
Yes, just two things to reflect. I think the first thing is around digital poverty. I think we actually forget sometimes that there's still a plethora of young people, communities, families out there who can't actually access laptops or mobile phones. I think that's one point to make, and I think the more we can encourage businesses to support communities and just reflect on that, I think that's the first thing. I think the second thing around, so we looked at this last year in terms of the recruitment process and how much more can it be inclusive, and I think that the bit around accessing applications, I think we found that with young people with disabilities, that was a significant barrier. And we have found some good practice as well. So there's an insurance company who looked at the application process and actually by auditing it and refining it, streamlining it from 6 pages to maybe 1 or 2 pages, I think they found that their completion rates actually increased by 75%. So quite significant, completion and impact and tangible outcome as well. So I think it's obviously looking at streamlining the application process. But again, I think I go back to data. The more employers can collect that data in terms of who's applying for the roles and where are people maybe falling through that sort of recruitment journey, I think the better you can make quite targeted interventions to support those groups, and that's all available in sort of toolkits. But I think it's just a critical thing. I'll go back to that point around the digital poverty piece. There's still a lot of communities out there who can't even access the digital laptops.
Yeah, absolutely. And what we'll do is we'll make sure the toolkits, etc., I mentioned, are sent out with all of the packs and the slides and the information and the information today too. Of course, there are programs, there are organisations that you can work with who are actively tackling digital poverty, but I think it is about being really clear and really honest about the expectations from the very beginning too. Actually, if a young person knows they have to fill in the application, if you tell them everything they have to get ready, in that moment where they can go to a job centre and apply or another place, they might feel safe and ready to do so. I think often it can be the case where they might have free Wi-Fi somewhere in McDonald's. They might have free Wi-Fi in McDonald's for half an hour, but then they get to the application and it's 20 more things than they were anticipating and expecting, and they can't finish it in time. And so I don't want to say they give up, but it's too frustrating to continue. It's probably a much better way of saying that statement too. Are there any more questions in the room? Yes, Tom.
Just interested in, from the panel and especially from Yola, what's the direction of travel in terms of leadership buy-in? So are we making progress? Are we seeing more employers, really step up? I mean, what's the feeling out there?
I think that's a really good question, Tom. I think when you look at the landscape, for me, you are concerned in terms of, what decisions might businesses have to make over the next couple of years. But again, when we actually bring business leaders together, so a couple of weeks ago, we brought about 10 business leaders, chief execs together, and when we took them to a school in Brent in London, and again, when you kind of bring business leaders together, when you enable them to see the potential that's untapped, and the more you can present those individual stories, I think the more you can influence business leaders back to what I was saying about making it a boardroom discussion and a boardroom agenda. And I think I looked at that and I was filled with more optimism that business leaders do want to continue to support young people into work, because there's a lot of talent that's untapped. And I think the last thing I'll say is, before joining business in the community, I was working on a youth program. And I remember this was sort of 10 years ago. I know my face might not show that age there, but this is about 10 years ago. And I remember, this young person who had gone through at the time, the youth offender system, now the youth justice system. He came on the program, 4 weeks residential program, and about 4 or 5 years later, I sort of bumped into him in the high street. And, at the time, I think he was nearly kicked off the program, but we sort of managed to keep him on the program. And about 3 or 4 years later, I bumped into him in the high street, and I couldn't remember him, but he sort of came up to me to say, hola, sir, which was which is strange in itself. And he said for him, that program made the biggest change to his life. He was exposed to things that he had never been exposed to. He eventually went to university. When I spoke to him, he had a couple of interviews lined up. And, for me, it's those sort of individual stories that we need to continue to showcase to business leaders, where we talk about big numbers, 100,000 being supported, but actually linking it back to the individual. And I think the more we do that, the more we can influence business leaders to make those responsible decisions.
Fabulous, thank you. Hayley, what's your sense? How are businesses feeling?
I think at the moment it's a challenging time. We've got some really engaged senior leaders and exec members in our business, but some of the wider challenges of the economy means that it can conflict with their passion. We've seen a real shift change actually in the last 12 months at Greencore. We've gone from kind of exec members being aware that they happen to them now actively saying, tell me about it, tell me what's happening, what can we do to change, and more, what can we do more to support you. And the way that we stepped that forward was just by putting them in front of our young people and actually seeing the real life stories and understanding their journey to date and their ambitions for the future. So I think at the minute, particularly, it's a head and heart thing for our leadership teams. They know it's absolutely the right thing to do. And hopefully we can just overcome some of those nervousnesses around what are the risks for a business at the moment.
It can feel really high pressure, can't it? That actually if you're going to put your head and your heart into just forcing an apprenticeship program or a T-level program in, of course people will drop out. We are people, we are humans, our life changes, but it does feel like actually it feels so high risk when it doesn't always in any other role or any other opportunity. Kira, what is your sense? And you don't necessarily have to talk about your own organisation, but perhaps from yourself and your peer group, do you feel like what is kind of your temperature check on employers? Do you think and see that they're doing more? Do you feel like they would see it's riskier having a young person on board than before?
I think it's a bit of both. I do kind of agree it's a bit of a head and heart thing. They want to do the right thing, but then I think with then the change in government, everyone's trying to see like what's going to happen and all the policies that are going to be created. People want to do kind of the right thing and employ more young people, but I think with what you're hearing in the media about like rising antisocial behaviour as well, I don't know if some employers is not that young people aren't worth the investment, but maybe they think it might be a bit more risky, especially in certain areas. They might not understand certain communities and the way kind of people communicate and do things. I don't know. I think it's a bit of a combination of things, and annoyingly, I think only time will tell, but I think more people are waking up to what's going on. Youth Employment UK are getting involved, and other organisations and employers here today are really trying to inform government and local government and councils about what's going on. So the more they keep listening and then hopefully turn that into action, it'll get better, hopefully.
Amazing. It sounds, though, that for a few more years I have to go on radio stations and tell old white men that young people aren't lazy, but that's fine. That's part of my job for more years to come. We have another question.
Thank you, Lauren. I just picking up on the question that Tom answered, and we can all, as an employer myself, we can all talk about the challenges that we're facing because of the recent budget. But, for 10 years, the UK the investment in training has gone down by 20% for 10 years. We're now less than half of our EU competitors in terms of the investment in training at the average as UK PLC. Where is the kind of leadership that we need to show, does the panel think needs to come from the business community itself, and not just look at the short-term now challenges, but take those longer-term views that will actually change some of these issues, and whether the panel thinks that potentially we might need to work as sectors to do this as opposed to individual businesses. Instead of being in an FMCG competitive environment, that we actually start to think about how we can, as a bunch of retailers or a bunch of awarding organisations or whatever, actually come together as a sector to try and do some of these issues.
Such an excellent question. It potentially helps bring on some of those SMEs into the conversation a bit faster too. Hayley, do you mind going first?
Yeah, I think for our organisation, we do partner with a number of organisations to help with that. So the National Skills Academy, Louise does a lot of work around that in terms of taking the voices from the food and drink industry and putting that to the government to try and inform some of those decisions that will be made. We also partner with IGD, so with the other grocers, and again, trying to collaborate with them and not just see everyone as a competitor. We're in different positions on the market. So as an organisation, we definitely do lobby for that and try and inform and participate. Personally for us, we get involved with trailblazer groups to make sure that the right training's out there for us. And really thinking about what we need for the future. I think the biggest challenge we have is a lot of the decisions that come out of budget that tend to come out with 6-12 months notice, or all of a sudden, when you're a business, you tend to be planning 3 to 5 years out for the future, and it can really disrupt that. So I think kind of being part of those organisations, and I know that a lot of sectors have access to that, whether it be retail or, hospitality, etc. So yeah, I think definitely identifying who those organisations are, and even if it's just getting in contact with some people in a similar industry. I know that personally I'll connect with other employers just to discuss what are they doing and try and understand that best practice as well. So yeah, I definitely think there is a lot of space for that, and we try and get involved as much as possible. Ola?
Yes, very quickly, I think for me it's two things. I've seen some really good practice from employers in the utility sector in Norwich, just coming together to look at the skills gap in the area and creating apprenticeships and creating an apprenticeship standard to actually open up pathways and jobs for young people to come into work. But I think it's a partnership relationship. That's partnership within civil society organisations. I'm really pleased by the work the Youth Employment UK are doing. But I also think it's a bit of government working with businesses. I think, if you look at the work in Manchester, if you look at some of the work in Sheffield around regional mayors and metro mayors actually championing this issue and actually bringing businesses together, some of the work around MBAC, I think it's still early, but that has a lot of potential to actually open up doors for young people. But I really think, businesses can play that and should play that leadership role, but really should be a partnership between, government, whether that's regional, local or national, businesses and civil society as well.
What an excellent answer. Sharon, your last question. You can have it. Are you just going to ask it? Or is Laura going to run? Don't know. One of the two. Quick.
So it's not really a question for the panel, but probably more for Lauren or for LJ. In the 12 years since the organisation has been in place, we've obviously gone through recessions and various things. Who are the organisations or the types of organisations that you would say, from an employment perspective, have weathered the storm and would be trailblazers that the rest of us could, take advice from or share that best practice, that you would say, and you don't have to name the organisation, but the sorts of things that they have done to keep youth employment at the top of the agenda?
Oh, gosh, that's an excellent question. Ellie, just while I'm talking, pass your mic to LJ. Also, I think that I don't think there's one organisation that does everything really, really well, because it has to be the way up of opportunity and how their sector is done. I think it is about listening to people, though, too. And we always talk about listening to young people, but taking that feedback, listening and absorbing, listening to current staff and those that they are hiring and recruiting. Those that really care tend to weather the storm a lot better. But LJ, it's your cue.
I really interestingly, I was at an event a couple of weeks ago where I was listening to an employer, Cummins Diesel. They've been around since the early 1900s. They produce and manufacture diesel engines, which I now know more about than I should. But actually, I think what their success is, and they have weathered a lot of storms, is they really see their own leadership role in their community. So they're an employer based in Daventry in Northamptonshire, and they employ over sort of 1,000 people from that location, and they are investing in skills, they're investing in the local communities, they have an absolute social responsibility that they take very, very seriously in growing and maintaining that kind of presence in that community, because they know how much it's lifting the community. And I think that's really interesting, because then you take a look at, you know, where I am in Corby, Northamptonshire, where we've lost British Steel and Tata Steel is now going. That's decimating a community. And so I think perhaps it's where those organisations are really, really seeing their responsibility as a business in the community and is supporting its whole community, the schools, the colleges. It's part of the fabric. And I think that's where we've got to get back to, is our businesses. And it was this conversation actually at this meeting was, you know, profit is important. We get that. Profit really is important. But actually so is community, and so is your responsibility as a business to the local growth and to the local people and to your consumers. I think when we can put profit and purpose together, they'll be the businesses that weather the storm. And honestly, it's really interesting. 2 of my board members have kind of gone, what does the future look like here? Because we're worried as an organisation, as a membership body that's relying on employers, as an organisation with a vision to tackle youth unemployment. We know employers are going to slack off because they're worried about the economy. We have got to find those employers that are purposeful as well as profit-led. And I think that's where we'll hold our own. So I think that's my answer.
Thank you. Okay, we'll close then on my final question, and we'll go backwards. We'll give Kira the last word because she deserves it. So what, from all of the things today, could be our session, could be any of the others, what is the one thing employers could start with, big, small, medium?
I'll probably go back to what you said. I think it stuck with me, that question around what are you good at? I think the more employers can ask that when they're in front of young people, I think it's just an opportunity for young people to reflect. I mean, even me, I've been working for about 15 years, and that's a question that's still important for me to reflect on and be able to communicate as well. So I think that will be it for me. In those development conversations at work, what are you good at, and how can we better support you to unearth those skills that you have?
Amazing. Hayley?
And I think mine's quite similar, but mine was why. Why are you doing it? I've seen examples of employers that do these kind of programs in the past, and it is just because they think they should, without truly understanding what it's going to give them, what it's going to achieve for their business and for the young people involved. So I think it's really truly understanding the why, so that you know what to do for the best.
Amazing, thank you. And Kira?
I think the key thing is to remember who you're serving in this sense. So it is young people. I mean, everyone here today is here because they want to continue doing best practice and pick up good new habits and stuff, and also spread the word as well. Because, I mean, you all know why it's good to encourage young people to come in, to have those good programs and meaningful programs, but spread the word to people you know, be it friends and other colleagues and other companies. And I think just keep going, because it doesn't seem like it's a lot necessarily, and it's quite hard a lot of the time, but actually it's really spreading, and I see it myself, my friends have seen it. So yeah, I think just keep doing what you're doing and just really just spread the word and keep going.
On that bombshell, thank you to my panel. Thank you for closing the day.